So, Luis Moris, thanks very much for joining me on Hermitix podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
We are going to be discussing death on this lovely Monday, but it's going to be a discussion that's influenced and inspired by a recent publication called Confronting Death, published by Sharon Publications, who was kind enough to send me a review copy, so a big thank you to them. This is a collection of essays based loosely around the work of Carl Jung and what that looks like when one is confronting death and death in general. And for those that are long-time listeners to the podcast, the collection does include essays by two previous guests, Maurice Stein and Paul Bishop. And one thing to say about this collection is that all of these essays are very, very personal. No one in this collection is holding back. They are all, alongside the intellectual and conceptual ideas of Jung being brought in, these are foremost personal essays. But before we get into the collection and death, Luis, tell us a little bit about yourself and the origins of this collection.
Right. Well, first of all, I appreciate you said that, because that was precisely my intention. When I asked all these authors to write an essay on death and how they confront death, that was my big emphasis. I wanted these essays to be personal, not to be theoretical. Of course, theory is involved, but what I wanted the most was for them to speak out from their heart, as it were, and their own personal experiences. In a nutshell, I'm from Chile, from the south of Chile. I'm a Jungian analyst that I live and practice here in Zurich. I've been doing so for the last, I came here to Zurich 15 years ago, and I came to ISAP, a school for analytical psychology, to train. And since 2013, I've been practicing as a Jungian analyst and psychotherapist as well.
Okay. Well, I was thinking this morning I've sent you all these questions, and they are all a bit jumping into the deep end of specifics. So I was thinking this morning, what could I actually, because the reason I say this is death is like the end of all conversations, right? It's like the ultimate topic of all seriousness, all meaning, all reason to almost talk at all is death. So I thought, how do I kind of begin this? And so I thought to myself, well, maybe I should just ask him, what do you think of when you think of death?
Personally, it might sound bizarre, but I for a long time, I think and I feel an enormous curiosity. That's what what comes to my mind every time I think of death. I'm really hope that few moments before I die, I am aware that I am going to die. That's my hope. I would love to be able to experience that moment consciously, whether it is soon or hopefully much later. Hopefully, I'd love to. I love life, and I would love to live and see my daughter grow up and all the rest of it. But I really hope is curiosity. I'm very curious about what's coming next. If there is something coming, I would love to. If there is something, I'm very curious about it. Yeah.
That's exactly how I feel. I always, when I was young, and still now, I always used to be a bit, admittedly, frustrated when I heard people say, "Oh, it's okay, they died in their sleep," and I always used to think,
"Yeah,
they missed out."
Yeah.
Like, you only get to do it once.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. That's how my mother always speaks about her own mother, my grandmother, dying. Oh, she died peacefully. She was sleeping. I was like, oh no, what a pity.
So, you as a Jungian analyst, how prevalent is this? How big of an issue, common issue, is death? Is it something, I guess as well, how prevalent is it? But is it also something that, on the couch, so to speak, is something that a lot of people don't realize is actually what they're talking about? They begin somewhere thinking something is the problem, but actually at the end of that path, at the end of that analysis, it was death all along? How prevalent is that?
Well, so I think that, when I think of analysis, and Jungian analysis, particularly the way I approach it, I think that analysis is a sort of micro, intense moment that represent life. What do I mean by that? I mean, when people come, we don't speak about the weather. We don't speak about, the last football result. We go straight, usually kind of straight into very, very important topics. And it is not just a conversation between us. It is also a relationship that gets built. Because the way I am, I build a relationship. It's very difficult for me to not have a relationship. Like I'm more, standoff. I can't do that. I have to create a relationship. It always happens. So it is very intense. And it's, even though it is only 1 hour a week, it represents what happens outside of that hour very, very well, I find, the way I feel with the people, the topics. So death is omnipresent. Death is always, I think it's always there. I think that we have dreams, about death. We hear about people that die around us. Most of the people that I work with are around, midlife, 45, 40. I work with younger people and certainly with older people. I enjoy working with older people, but most of the people that I work with are around 40. So at that kind of, people start to die, when around that, parents, uncles, friends, unfortunately children sometimes. So it's omnipresent. Concerning the second half of your question, whether death was always there, I'm not. That's a good question. I'm not sure. An existentialist would say yes. Would say that the fear of death is always there. I'm not convinced about that idea that the fear of death is always present. I think that death is always present. I'm not sure about the fear of death always being there. But yes, I think that is omnipresent. Yeah.
That's intriguing in what you say about the fear of death, because it seems that, especially within the psychoanalytical framework, dealing with the unconscious, dealing with the Freudian foundation of repressions and things that are slipping out and things that don't want to be seen or we're tucking away in some sense, seems to be something adjacent to what might be called a fear or a sort of trepidation. Like there's a tension there that seems that it could be synonymous with fear. And so you don't think that all fear, as so many people say, that all fear is fear of death, that some of these smaller things you're dealing with in psychoanalysis are completely contextual and they don't have this drawn out existential relation all the way back to death?
Well, I think that's what separates us from other living creatures is self-awareness, right? So we are aware. I mean, it's from a certain age, we are aware that we're going to perish at one point. And that, I think, that creates, because of our attachment to our ego and to our relationships and to what we appreciate in life, I think that that creates a certain level of anxiety. Now to go that far to call it a fear, and a fear that runs life, as it were, as Irving Yalom would claim, the existentialist psychotherapist, very famous in the US. Yeah, I'm not totally convinced about that. But a certain anxiety, a certain underlying anxiety that is always there. Any sort of separation, I think, creates a certain amount of anxiety, and death is the ultimate separation, isn't it? So I'm not. Yes, I can't go as far as to say that all fear is fear of death. But you maybe you have something to say, because I am.
Well, it's interesting that there's it seems to me that there is a rising sort of three modes that maybe we overlook because death is so all-encompassing when we approach death. So one would be, as per the title of your book, an actual confrontation with death. One is just is the typical fear of death, which I guess is just, which I think is almost impossible. And it's very difficult to unpick all these. And the third one, I guess, would just be talking about death. So what I'm interested in, as per this title, is what do you think differentiates a confrontation with death? What do you think that looks like as opposed to those other modes?
Right. So I think that from a Jungian perspective, at least, what characterized, I think, the Jungian approach is to take the information that is coming from the unconscious utterly seriously. So very, very seriously, meaning whatever we dream of at night, whatever we fantasize when we are riding on the bus and we're daydreaming, or if we engage in some sort of meditation or active imagination, or what Jung calls the active imagination, to take these images very, very seriously. And many of these images involve death, ultimately, at one point, or images of the dead, your grandfather, and to start taking these images not as just pure fantasy, not just kind of this, I was just daydreaming, but to actually to ask yourself the question, well, could that, as crazy as it may sound, could that be actually the dead? Could actually that be my grandfather that appeared in a dream, for instance? And I think that is what separates Jungian psychotherapy from other psychotherapeutic approaches. All psychotherapeutic approaches are going to deal with death in one way or another. All psychotherapists. But what separates the Jungian approach, I think, is that if we dream of a dead person, the analyst, the psychotherapist, is confronted with the question: okay, is this a symbol, or is this a literal image? Usually, when we learn how to interpret dreams in Jungian schools, we learn that there are two types of analysis, or two types of interpretation: a subjective and an objective interpretation. The subjective interpretation means that when you dream of a house, that house is attached to the subject that is dreaming the house. So it's a symbolic. The house might represent your psyche. It might represent your personality. That would be a subjective, symbolic interpretation. And I think that most of Jungian analysts, when we interpret dreams, that's kind of what we go to, symbolic. And rightly so, I think. But every now and again, we have dreams. Jung himself interpret dreams in an objective way. So you would dream of your father-in-law. Well, and the dream is not talking about the symbol that he's representing as part of your personality, but you're dreaming actually about your father-in-law. So, if you have a problem with your father-in-law and you have a dream with him, and there is something going on in the dream probably is talking about what is going on within you in relationship to your father-in-law in reality. Same thing with an image of a dead person. If your great uncle or grandfather, whatever, appears in a dream and he's dead, the Jungian analyst is kind of confronted with the question, okay, is this a subjective interpretation, or should we go into the possibility of an objective interpretation, meaning it is a visitation, as it were,
A visitation.
A visitation, you could say a visitation in the dream. Your grandfather is coming from
wherever that might be. Yeah.
Right. And he's coming to see you, and he's coming to give you a message. I'm not saying that I guess what I'm trying to say is that because of the theory and because of the openness of Jung, theoretically speaking, we can actually ask these questions. They are absolutely valid within the theory of Jungian analysis.
Well, we can ask the dead questions.
Yeah.
So, and this is what Jung would sort of call an encounter with the dead.
For instance, Jung encountered the dead in what he called encountering the dead in different occasions throughout his life. And I could, we could do an entire podcast about all the anecdotes of Jung talking about how he encountered the dead. In 1916, in the middle of writing the Red Book, right before he wrote arguably the most important part of the Red Book, which is 7 sermons, he claimed that his house was haunted by the spirits that were coming from Jerusalem because these dead did not find what they were looking for. In England, in your home country, in I think it was 1923, 24, he went for a month to give several lectures, and he did not only see a ghost of a woman, he smelled her. Mm-hmm. And he had to leave that cottage where he was staying because this dead woman didn't allow him to sleep and to rest. And of course, the Red Book is it's filled with images that Jung calls the dead. And according to the editor of the Red Book, Sonu Shamdasani, when Jung calls these images the dead, this is no metaphor. These are the dead, according to Jung. These are really our ancestors. And I could go on and on. When Jung talks about encountering the dead, I think that he was not close to the idea that when we die, our soul continues to exist somewhere, and every now and again, these souls can come back and visit us. But I think that it's important to say, though, that this was no. These are my. It's because of my research that I can talk about this. Many Jungians that would be listening to me right now, to our conversation, would be saying, "What is this chap saying?" But I think that he was very open to this. He interpreted dreams of a very important anecdote is Marie-Louise von Franz, a very close collaborator from Jung, had a dream in which his father was coming to see her, and Jung told her, "Yes, this is your father. This is no symbol. This is your father."
So how during analysis, how do you? I'm sure there isn't some tick box method to do so, but how do you differentiate between a symbol and actually understanding that actually this may very well be a dead person from the other side?
Right. I think that usually dreams that involve an objective interpretation, they have a certain feeling quality. Mm-hmm. You go for interpretation, or you kind of suggest to the analysand, to your patient, to your client, well, what if this is a visitation, and maybe the person is going to say, "No, you're crazy. What are you talking about? This is just nuts." And some other people might be more open and start exploring that possibility. And in reality, if your interpretation is wrong, the next dream will correct it. The next dream will come and say, no, here is another dream pay attention to this, what you're thinking is wrong. Usually that happens. Yeah, usually that happens. Usually dreams often come in series. It's not just one dream. Sometimes it's only one dream, but many times they come in series. So they are there to, if we pay attention, if we mind them, they are there to help us.
So it's intriguing, isn't it, that with a visitation, with someone sort of appearing, whether it's as you say, father-in-law or someone from a family or whoever it might be, it seems like there's a debt or an issue, guilt. It's like something's being held, and without sounding coy, it's almost as if the same psychoanalytical session is going on the other side, and these two people have, right, like we've got to sort this out, or neither of us can move. So it's intriguing that because it just seems, it almost as if, what's the reason for the dead person to show up? So I wonder, do you know if Jung ever mentioned, well, why? Because they could just bugger off into the afterlife and leave you with the issue, and yet some sort of equilibrium needs to be worked out here. And I wonder why Jung thought that happened.
Absolutely, I mean, that's very well put. There is, again, the editor of the Red Book, which is arguably, the one of the most important academics for Jungian psychology at the moment, and arguably the most important historian that we've had in Jungian analysis, in Jungian psychology. And he wrote this very short but very potent essay in 2008, the Boundless Expand is called, Sonu Shamdasani. And he postulates in that essay that Jung had a personal cosmology, meaning that he played around with ideas of the afterlife. He didn't explicitly write about them. But he himself entertained these ideas, and they were, Jung was throughout his entire life very, very engaged with the question of death. That's that is not an opinion. It's very easily provable. And in these, and that's where Shamdasani ends, kind of. That's what he says, and he says that there is something about, for Jung, part of his personal cosmology is to help the dead continue developing. That sounds pretty far out, of course, but that's what Shamdasani is postulating. So I took that information and I did my own research, and particularly the Red Book. And what I found out is not only that Shamdasani, not surprisingly, is right, but also that is the other way around. I think that there is what you use the word equilibrium, and I found that is very good, because in his personal cosmology, in his Weltanschauung of the dead, in this worldview of death, it seems that Jung played around with the idea that not only we are helping the dead continue developing, but the dead are also trying to help us continue our own development. It is a sort of, we're helping each other for the individuation of humanity. And it would seem that is a sort of both sides are trying to go, are striving for the same thing. Now I know that sounds a little bit crazy, but I think that when you read the Red Book and you read it with an open mind, you come to see that what he is writing about is very much metaphysical ideas, very much about ideas that don't concern these mundane existence, and that he is just going along with his imagination, and that is what is coming out, a sort of help between each other.
Yeah, and this seems to connect in with notions of the afterlife, because this is quite a striking statement from Jung that appears in the collection of essays. He says, "A man should be able to say he has done his best to form a conception of life after death." So not only should we be helping them, we should have some idea of where we're going, where they've gone,
Right.
and what exactly does that process look like? Is this something that comes up in analysis of, I guess, helping people form some idea of what might be to come?
I think that when people engage into some sort of beyond ego practice, we can start playing with that idea. If by talking, by reasoning, we don't get very far. But I have clients that do active imagination, and in their active imagination, they go, to all sorts of places. I've had clients that have done some sort of psychedelic experiences with either ayahuasca or some sort of substance that altered their state of ego, and they come to see me afterwards with all these kind of images and experiences that they've had, and then they are much more open to talk and to wonder and to fantasize, as it were, about what might happen after we die. When there is a soulful connection, with a soulful experience, I think that people are much more open to these sort of topics. Just our reason is way too limited and is way too attached to ego, is way too attached to the physicality of existence. So it's very difficult to go beyond that, I think. Dreams, of course, are very, very helpful. Dreams, yeah.
Would the same logic apply in terms of dreams for place as well, in the sense that if we take to this objective reading of a person, and that would say that someone is somehow coming through to us from the other side, they are literally them. Would the same hold for perhaps a rare occasion where we're seeing the other side? Like, again, that feeling of the dream, that this isn't just a dream, actually you're seeing something that is, real.
Right.
Does that apply as well?
That's a good question, James. I'm not. I'm not sure. There is. So I'm sure that you've heard of these near-death experiences, very famously, and there is these neuroscientists in the University of Virginia. They have an entire department of perception. It's called the Department of Perception, and there is an important group of scholars there working on paranormal experiences and on near-death experiences, all very scientific, And there is this professor there called Bruce Grayson, and he's describing. He's interviewed thousands and over 50 years, thousands of people, that have had a near-death experience, and they all talk about this tunnel with the light at the very end of the tunnel, a sort of bright light, and this sense of bliss, and very similar to what Jung experienced when he had his own near-death experience in 1944. So there is a similarity there in terms of place. You could say, in terms of this light at the very end of this tunnel. But I don't know much more than that in terms of places. But that's a very good question, though.
So I'm wondering, as we mentioned equilibrium, what the balancing act is for a relationship with death that is unhealthy. Well, these are very rough words, but unhealthy versus healthy, because it seems, and this is sort of the cliche thing to say about the modern world, it seems that in the so-called secular modern world, we have a very unhealthy relationship with death in the fact that we don't really have one at all, except for very quick moments at a funeral where we no longer see the bodies. Some people won't even talk to their children about it.
Absolutely.
But equally, is there a sort of an unhealthy relationship that goes all the other way, where someone's life is just death?
Right.
And I wonder what that equilibrium looks like for you.
Right. By the way, you've raised a very important topic, because I am absolutely in agreement with you. Our relationship to death is almost inexistent. We, in fact, I'm going to tell you a couple, and I ask for her permission so I can use this, because I'm writing a paper about it now, and I have these clients of mine. She is in her 40s and mother and everything, and she told me she's studying now to become into the health. She's into health business, and she said that what she wants is that she wants to become a professional and help women in general, to become hot and horny until the age of 70.
That's what
she said. That's just what she wants to do. She's told me, this is, if men can stay healthy, and so can we. And I want women to be hot and horny when they are 70. So we started to talk about this. What is that? Why would you want women in their 70s to be hot and horny? And and she started to describe, what her thinking was. And very quickly, it was evident that what she was pushing against is the whole idea of aging, and the whole idea, obviously, of death. And I thought that was just so, it represents so much our mentality nowadays. There are plenty of podcasts and nutritional stuff for us to stay young, for us to stay young, and to keep, being basically fit and super fit and young and healthy, basically until we die. We don't want to age. We don't want to become old. And I find that is everyone to look good and not have white hair or anything like this. And I feel that there is a certain pathology about it. There is in pathology in terms of not accepting nature, not accepting what life is all about, which is, dying at one point, and preparing to it, going to it, and going back to your question, being too concentrated on death. I wonder what that would look like. The Dalai Lama and many Buddhist monks meditate every day on death. They meditate their own death. That's what they do in the morning. They spend a couple of hours visualizing the different steps that they are taking when they are dying. But they seem to be very much here also in this existence. I don't think that I wouldn't be able to do that, to meditate every day on my death. But I do think about my death often, of course, but not every day. But I don't know what would look like to be too into death, even though that's maybe I cannot say much about it because I'm so because that's what I do.
Yeah.
I write about death, and but I love life very, very much, and
it's interesting that you mentioned the wanting to be hot and horny until your 70s, because sex and death seem to put in that way, sex and death seem to be two pillars that are as far apart as you can get. Or sex is the ultimate affirmation of life, and they want to do it until the final day.
Absolutely.
But it brings up the fantastic question of because a lot of people seem, we're sort of circling back to the idea of fear here. A lot of people seem to think that they're possibly scared of death, that is maybe one of the most common fears. But when you really start to drill down in it, because I have a little bit, I think I would be surprised to find anyone who says I'm absolutely not scared. But I often sit with it and I wonder, well, what it doesn't really feel like fear, and it's, when I think about death, it's completely unknown. I can't know anything about it, and I wonder if it is really a deep disappointment that I have to get old, and there will be a stretch of time, maybe months, maybe even years, where I will have lost control, where I won't be able to do maybe nothing because I'm so ill and frail and whatever. And I wonder if that period of time is the real dying, is the real fear. Whereas death, I think about it, I can't do anything with it.
Absolutely,
It's like hitting a wall.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that, you're absolutely right. I think that when people really give it room and start wondering about it, death itself is so abstract, so that unless we engage actively, considering the images that are coming from dreams, it is very difficult to relate to it. But aging and dying, if we have not, I suppose, been committed to some sort of conversation within oneself, with others, about you not being the very center of everything, and the ultimate reality, and you have given room to that mystery, the mystery of life, it's going to be very difficult, I think, to grow old. But I think that if you have been practicing dying, in a, like Plato would say, practicing the idea of dying, by engaging into contemplation, by realizing that you are not the center of everything and there is something beyond us, whatever that might be, I think that process that you're describing might be perhaps better lived.
This is a somewhat controversial question. Do you think a lot of people today, maybe not arrogantly, it's not a conscious thought they have, but because their disengagement, their non-engagement with death is so potent, ironic, paradoxically, they actually don't think they're going to die.
Yeah.
They really can't face because there's almost nothing in life that's certain, right? Pretty much nothing, and nothing is certain, nothing is mandatory, and yet we absolutely know death is. And as you said, so many people have these, life extension, always being young, sort of this uphill struggle, and it just does seem at times, and I know Schopenhauer said this as well, that so many people just really, the death comes to them as a genuine shock, like a genuine surprise.
Right. Well, what I could say about that is, Jung wrote about the span of life in different ways, in different papers, but in a few papers, he wrote about death as two different halves. There is the first half of life and there is the second half of life. And he described it using the trajectory of the sun. And he spoke about the meridian point as the middle point. So the first half of life is from, say, 0 to, say, 35, between 35 and 45.
Mm-hmm.
And during that first half of life, Jung writes that it is all about ego development. It's all about creating an identity in society, choosing a partner, perhaps creating a family, getting yourself some sort of place in society with a name, and it's all about ego development, strength, and death shouldn't be, at all in your mind. It's all about you in a healthy way, of course, not in a narcissistic way. And all that is good up until you'll hit a certain age between 35 and 45, in which there will be an inner shift. Something would gradually start happening within you. And midlife crisis, the midlife crisis would start appearing. In these papers, what Jung writes about, and the way he describes it, which I love how he does it, is that what midlife represents is the birth of death. That's what he writes. That's what happens in midlife. Is that all of a sudden, not only these things that we have been fighting for and working very hard for, the car, the house, the title, the bank account, not only these things start to kind of gradually start losing importance. There is something else that you start realizing, and is that it's like, shit, I'm gonna die. At some point, this is going to end. And there is a sort of shift towards the inside. There is a sort of, in a healthy personality, you would argue, these things outside, since they start gradually losing importance, there is something that is gaining importance, which is your inner world. So all that sort of adaptation, this huge psychic energy that you spent during 30, 40 years adapting to the outer world, is now inversed. And there is a sort of necessity to adapt to what is inside of you. And in that adaptation to the inner world, there is the realization, the profound realization that we're going to die. And the question is that, well, is this all there is to it? Kind of comes up. And we start looking at other things, such as dreams and such as visions. And that's when usually people end up going to see a shrink.
or as per the seemingly common, it's interesting you mentioned that the flip is to the inner life, that there's been this developed personality that then flips, I guess, from the external to the inner life.
Right.
Now, it's interesting that, and this is, I guess, my own rather pessimistic turning my nose up at the modern world, that when we think of midlife crisis now, we actually think more so, in common parlance, we think more so of externalities. They're going through a midlife crisis, so they're more out in the world. Right. They're bungee jumping. They've taken up a hobby. They're going on more holidays. So I wonder, is such the case that if your personality hasn't really been developed in that first, to the point up to the meridian, that you don't really have anything, you don't have, you turn in on yourself, there's nothing there to deal with death, and so what do? You just keep going outward. Right. That seems like a form of panic.
Absolutely, I agree with you. Yeah, and that would be an unhealthy way of dealing with the second half of life. Absolutely unhealthy. And that's what Jung writes in this paper. In case you're interested, it is called, these two papers that I'm talking about. The first one was written in 29, and is called The Stages of Life. The second one is in 34, The Soul and Death. And in these papers, Jung writes, why shouldn't a man prepare for death for 20 years or more? And I think that when he is talking about preparing for death, he is basically talking about why shouldn't a man confront his inner images for 20 years or more, because that's what he considers a preparation for death, is looking at what's going on inside of you, and not just your feelings and how you feel about your wife and your children, but going beyond that. And that's where I personally think that Jungian psychology has something unique to offer when it comes to the question of death.
Because of that actual preparation.
Because of the actual preparation and because of that openness. I don't think that Jungian psychology is saying there is life after death. I don't think that Jung is saying that. I don't think that Jung is saying, the dead are helping us and we need to help the dead. That was his thing. That was his personal stuff. But I think that what he's saying clearly is, how come are you so sure that there is nothing after death? Why shouldn't you be thinking about it? Yeah. Why shouldn't you explore that mystery? How sure are you about this extremely reductive, materialistic way of thinking that we've created, since the scientific revolution? How sure are you? And because the religion, this established religions have not been as followed as they were 300 years ago, everything comes down to the individual and to the personal experience, and that's where, again, experiences such as meditation, dreams, experiences that are sometimes done with substances can be of great help, because they can give you hint. Basically, that's about it. They can give you a hint, and then you can wrestle with the hint, whether they talk to you or not, and maybe you can create a conception of life after that, or maybe not. But you've tried, at least. I don't think that the answer is so important. I think that the question is more important than the answer.
It gives us something to be built instead of just winding down. And it seems that thing that, after the meridian, the thing that is being worked with, wrestled with, is really, it's a relationship of wonder and mystery. It's not pessimistic, because death has become synonymous with illness, pain.
I know, yeah.
And wrong. It's wrong. Don't talk about it. You shouldn't be talking about that.
Right, absolutely, and I'm glad you say that, because I when I mentioned to friends or to people that I am interested in the topic of death, they all look at me. Oh no, why? What's wrong? And I personally don't find it sad or anything like this. It's quite on the contrary. I wouldn't say that it's a happy topic in itself, but it's just intellectually, spiritually, is very stimulating. It's very it's vast. Is the greatest question.
Well, I think anything that absolutely that you have to do, which death is really the only thing, you are going to die and it's mandatory, to then project onto that something like pessimism or sadness or tragedy is really a story that you're telling yourself. And I wonder what needs or could happen to really transform death into something more like thinking about a dream, thinking about something open, and it's still got such a dark tinge to it. Whereas I think we could begin to think about it as really, well, I wonder what will happen in this wondrous moment.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. And the problem is that we've thrown rituals out of the window. As you were mentioning, we don't see dead bodies. We don't see, at least here, I live in Zurich, in big cities. We rarely see the funeral. How do you call when they go with the car and everything? The march. Yeah, right. We don't see that. We don't experience death. The dead. The people die in hospitals, and from there we don't see the body anymore, except maybe in the funeral a little bit. And that's about it. And that's what rituals, that's what they do for us. It's not just something for the dead, it's something for us too. And we have to, when we are there in rituals, we are confronted with the questions. So what happens now? What happened to this person? What is going to happen to me? What is going to happen to my child? We are confronted with this very difficult question. And since we don't have rituals, it's I think the rituals, unfortunately, they play a big role in how we wonder about these questions.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything you'd like to add about the book or death that you feel is key that we haven't touched upon?
Well, I mean, basically, I kind of just I believe that what these authors did was to have the courage. You know, they really needed courage to sit down and to spend hours just writing about how they think about their own end and the end of the client. So I find that the book in itself is it can be helpful, can be practically helpful for someone that wonders about this question of death and wonders about how to go about it.
So other than reading this book, what advice would you have for people who want to begin confronting death?
Listen to your dreams.
Anything to look out for in dreams?
I think that in general, just if you pay attention to what the images of your dream, and if you are able to not follow a guide and to not go on internet and say, oh, what does this mean, but to just be open to experiencing the dream, to be able to bring your feelings to the dream, to kind of write them down and to slowly go through the dreams again, and to maybe not only go with your feelings but also go with your sensations, the colors, the smell of the dream, the forms that you're seeing, and to try to relive the dream as much as possible. I think that they can be extremely helpful. And when dead images come, to not be completely closed off to the possibility, because we don't know, to the possibility that they might not be just a symbol. They might be the actual dead, and to be open to the idea. Why not? I mean, how bad that can be.
What if people find that overwhelming?
Yeah, I think that if some people find I think that that's when the space of analysis can be very helpful. I think that if you find the topic of death overwhelming, too threatening, then you're basically saying that a central part of what you are is overwhelming, because you are dying. We all are dying to a certain degree. No, every day we're getting closer and closer to our death. So if you cannot somehow go about that reality, that fact, there is probably something very fundamental in life that you're not being able to conceive, to so what are you so concerned about? Why are you so attached to this? I think that's where analysis can be of an enormous help to, if you really have a fear, say, of death, and plenty of people do. Not everyone, but plenty.
Is there anything you'd like to add?
Not right now. I'm sure that after I hang up, I'm gonna say, "Oh, I should have said that." But no, I really have enjoyed your questions, and I have enjoyed the conversation.
Are you working on another book, or are you cutting the test?
Yeah, I'm starting to translate my PhD thesis into a more readable, friendly book. It's too academic, and I'm not I don't like it how that is. So I'm working on that, and the book is basically Jung's take on death and on life after death, and I'm basically, the basic argument is that Jung saw his therapeutic approach as a preparation for death, and that his psychotherapeutic techniques were the way of preparing for the end of life. That's kind of my take. It's not only that, of course. It's not only his therapeutic process. It's not only about death. It's not only about preparing for death, but certainly it is part of it.
Well, hopefully Chiron published that as well, and I'll get to read it in time. But I'll be sure to put the links for Confronting Death in the description below. You're practicing analyst at the moment. Are you currently taking clients for anyone who's...
No, at the moment, unfortunately, I'm not. I work only in person. I don't work online. And at the moment, fortunately, I'm kind of full at the moment.
Okay. Well, there we go. I'll be sure to put the links for everything in the description below. But Luis Moris, thanks very much.
Thank you, James.